Diana had reached a point of no return, though she couldn't pinpoint when exactly. She knew it was too late, even if someone were calling Marty's phone. She wasn't interested in answering and buried her face in her pillow, mumbling thank you to herself as she finally started to unwind. But the ringing returned, more persistent than before, and she groaned, reopening her eyes. "Martin, answer your damn phone," she shouted, only to stop suddenly when she noticed her husband wasn't in bed next to her. She glanced at the clock, 3:37 a.m. Reaching for her phone on the nightstand, Diana began to wonder where Marty could be. He had been home when they went to bed. Still half asleep, she mumbled hello into the phone. "Is this Diana Miller?" came a voice from the other side. "Yes, that's me," Diana replied, now more alert. "Who is this, Mrs. Miller?" "This is the Northtown Medical Center emergency room. Your husband was brought in about an hour ago, and we found your contact information from a previous incident," the caller explained. "Could you come in immediately? There's been a car accident." "Oh my God, is he okay?" Diana cried, her concern clear. "I'm not authorized to give details over the phone." "Ma'am, please come as soon as you can," the voice urged. "I'll be there right away," Diana promised, before rushing upstairs to her daughter's room. Dallas, named after the city where she was conceived, was attending a nearby university and had decided to live at home to save money. Though she enjoyed dorm life during her first year, she soon realized it wasn't ideal for studying. "Dee, wake up," Diana called softly, gently shaking her daughter's shoulder. Dallas blinked, her eyes open, still groggy. "Your dad's been in an accident. He's at the hospital. Get dressed. We have to go," Diana urged, already pulling out clothes for Dallas. Once they were dressed, they hurried to the hospital. Dallas bombarded her mother with questions during the ride, but Diana had few answers. The drive felt like an eternity, though light traffic meant it only took about 10 minutes. Upon arriving at Martin's room, they were shocked by his condition, bandaged and unconscious. As they filled out paperwork, a nurse commented dryly, "Grief doesn't get you out of paperwork." Dallas moved her chair closer to her father, and they stayed together for about an hour until 2 police officers, a man and a woman, entered the room. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Gail Stanton, and this is my partner Robert Hansen." "We were the first on the scene," Officer Stanton introduced herself. "Do you have any updates on his condition?" Diana asked. "Not yet," Officer Hansen replied. "This is my daughter, Dallas. You have questions for us?" Diana said, trying to keep calm. "Yes, if you don't mind. Can you confirm where your husband was before the accident?" Officer Stanton asked. "He was at home. We went to bed around 10 p.m. I didn't know he'd left until the hospital called," Diana responded. "Dallas, can you confirm this?" Officer Hansen asked. "Yes, we watched a movie with Keanu Reeves around 10. Then we all went to bed. I saw Dad go to the bedroom with Mom," Dallas confirmed. "Any significant issues recently, financial or marital problems?" Officer Stanton inquired. "Nothing out of the ordinary," Diana replied. "I'm just confused as to why he left without telling me. Were there any injuries in the other vehicle?" Diana asked. "That's the thing, Mrs. Miller. It was a single car crash. Witnesses say your husband's car was driving normally, then suddenly accelerated into a tree. There were no skid marks, no brake lights," Officer Hansen explained. As the weight of the words sank in, Diana and Dallas exchanged worried looks. "Are you suggesting my husband did this on purpose? That he tried to take his own life?" Diana asked, her voice shaking. "We'll need to inspect the car for mechanical issues and, of course, speak with your husband when he regains consciousness. But yes, it's a possibility," Officer Stanton clarified. "Are you sure there weren't any underlying problems?" Diana pressed. "Officers, my husband and I have a strong marriage. There's nothing I can think of that would lead to this. It must have been an accident. He probably fell asleep at the wheel. It was so late," she managed to say before breaking down into tears. Officer Stanton left her card on the table, suggesting they reach out if they remembered anything else, then departed. Dallas closed the door to Martin's room. "You didn't tell them?" she asked. "No, Dallas, I didn't," her mother replied, wiping away her tears. "It's not their business, and it doesn't have anything to do with the accident. Your father wouldn't want that shared. Let's see what he says when they talk to him." The following days dragged on, with Martin remaining unconscious. Diana and Dallas stayed at the hospital as much as they could, ensuring Martin was never alone. Diana contacted his employer to explain his absence but made no mention of the accident's potential cause. The crash had happened on a Saturday night, and by Wednesday morning there were signs Martin was waking up. His eyes fluttered open by noon, and though he couldn't speak, he could look around. Diana, noticing, approached his bed to offer comfort. Soon, a nurse rushed in, responding to the alert on the monitors, and Diana stepped aside to let the medical staff work. More doctors arrived to assess Martin, and Diana took the chance to step out and call Dallas, leaving her a voicemail when she didn't pick up. As most of the equipment was removed, it became clear that Martin's left arm was broken. However, being right-handed, this wouldn't be a significant obstacle. Unable to speak due to irritation from the breathing tube, Martin was given a whiteboard to communicate. After reading his note, the nurse nodded, confirmed with Martin, and left the room to speak with the other staff. Shortly after, a doctor approached Diana. "Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry to inform you, but your husband has requested that neither you nor your daughter be allowed to visit his room anymore." The nurse relayed the message, but Diana insisted, "I have every right to be with my husband." "I understand, Mrs. Miller, but the patient's wishes take priority," the nurse explained. "Let me talk to him, and we'll figure this out." Despite her frustration, Diana tried to bypass the nurse, but was quickly stopped. Frustrated, she shouted, "Martin, please talk to me. What's happening?" "Mrs. Miller, please stop shouting. You're disturbing other patients. You may wait outside, but if you continue trying to enter or disrupt the area, we will have to ask you to leave. Do you understand?" The nurse warned firmly. Diana sighed and, realizing she had no other choice, nodded in reluctant agreement. Dallas arrived shortly after and saw her mother sitting outside the room. "Mom, why are you sitting here? Why aren't you sitting here? Why aren't you inside?" "Your father banned both of us from entering," Diana replied. "Both of us? I get why he wouldn't want you, but why me?" Dallas asked, confused. "And why didn't you come to the hospital sooner?" "I just woke up when Bradley stopped by to check on me. We're sort of dating now." "You stayed with your boyfriend instead of being here for your father," Diana responded, clearly disappointed. "Dad was unconscious when I left," Mom Dallas said, unapologetically. "It's been stressful, and I needed a break. It helped. By the way, you should give him a call when you can," she added casually. "I'm not going to do that." "Let's not talk about this now, it's inappropriate," Diana snapped back, irritated. The irony of her words wasn't lost on Dallas, who chuckled to herself. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. A tall, attractive brunette entered, dressed in professional clothing but not a medical uniform. Her badge showed she was hospital staff. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. I'm Dr. Lasser, one of the mental health specialists here." "How are you feeling?" she asked. "As good as I can be, given the circumstances." "It's been 9 days since the accident," Martin replied, now able to speak without using the whiteboard. He asked about his discharge, though no specific date was given. "The hospital requested I speak with you. I'll need to evaluate you before clearing you for discharge," Dr. Lasser explained. She smiled slightly, then pulled up a chair next to the bed and crossed her legs. After reviewing his records for a few minutes, she said, "So, you were admitted over a week ago following a car accident. I also see that you've restricted your wife and daughter from visiting. There must be a connection there." "I see," Martin acknowledged. "She was unfaithful," he confessed. "Sadly, infidelity is common nowadays, though it doesn't often result in this kind of reaction." "Is there more to the story?" Dr. Lasser asked gently. Martin remained quiet for a few minutes, uncomfortable discussing such personal issues with an attractive woman. He considered asking for a male psychiatrist, but ultimately decided to continue. "I think I'd been depressed for a while, though it was never officially diagnosed. I'd feel down for no particular reason, or because of specific things. And then there was the issue with my performance, which started about a year after the previous accident." "Right. Perhaps your wife was aware of this, or even had access to your medical history. She could have been waiting for you to acknowledge it," Dr. Lasser suggested. "It wasn't even a serious accident," Martin explained. "I was in the back seat, my boss was in the passenger seat, and his boss was driving. We got rear-ended, no airbags deployed, and there wasn't much damage. But I hit my head on the seat in front of me. That's what probably caused it. The report does mention a mild concussion," Dr. Lasser added, "but the exact cause of your condition couldn't be determined. They tried all sorts of medications and ran multiple tests, some more than once. All they could figure out was that something had damaged part of my brain. The result? I couldn't perform in bed anymore, and that led to my wife's dissatisfaction, which eventually pushed her into an affair. That night, it all came crashing down. Is that about right?" Martin summarized. "Yes, that's correct," Dr. Lasser confirmed. "How long after your condition began did the infidelity occur?" "About 7 or 8 months later," Martin replied. "We tried everything to fix it, even talked about spending weekends together in bed, but nothing worked. Eventually, it dragged on so long that she sought satisfaction elsewhere. Did she discuss this with you beforehand? Dr. Lasser asked. No, I found out when I came home early from work one day. Not only was she with him, but my daughter and her boyfriend were also there, Martin explained. Were they all involved together? Dr. Lasser asked, surprised. No, thankfully. Diana and her lover, Bill, were in the bedroom, while Dallas and her boyfriend, Brad, were in the living room. That's how I discovered my wife's affair, and my daughter knew about it and didn't seem to mind, Martin recounted. That likely explains why your daughter was also excluded from your room, Dr. Lasser noted. Yes, and if I didn't mention it before, Bill is Brad's father. We knew him as our daughter's boyfriend's dad, but later I found out it was Dallas who suggested her mother get involved with him. Another blow, Martin added. Did you confront them? Dr. Lasser probed further. Not exactly. If Dallas hadn't been there, I might have confronted Diana, but I had seen enough, so I left, Martin recalled. What happened when you talked afterward? Dr. Lasser asked. Not what I expected. She said she regretted that I found out but made it clear that if I couldn't meet her needs, she'd go elsewhere. She didn't want to be alone, and Bill was single and in a similar situation, so they became involved, Martin explained. How did you respond? Dr. Lasser asked. What could I do? She was right that I couldn't meet her needs. It wasn't her fault, so she did what she thought was necessary, Martin admitted. If she had discussed it with you beforehand, would you have agreed? Dr. Lasser asked. I've thought about that a lot. Part of me wanted to say yes because I loved her and wanted her to be happy. But in the end, I don't think I could have agreed to it, Martin admitted. We made vows, promises to each other, including to be there in sickness and health. I couldn't break that commitment, so I couldn't understand how she could betray me, Martin reflected. Obviously, she kept seeing him. I'm unsure if they met more often afterward, as I didn't know how frequently they saw each other before. But before, it was limited to when I was at work. Now, it included weekend outings, like trips to the store, where she clearly spent time with Bill. Martin recalled. That must have been really tough, Dr. Lasser sympathized. Tough. That doesn't even begin to describe it. I felt completely powerless. She deserved intimacy, but I couldn't give it to her, and it was tearing me apart, Martin admitted. Tell me about the night of the accident, Dr. Lasser prompted. The whole family watched a movie together. I kept my emotional pain to myself, which in hindsight was probably a mistake, but I didn't want to burden Diana or Dallas. They exchanged goodnight kisses. But I only got a simple night from Dallas. That's when I realized she had lost all respect for me, both as her father and as a man. I couldn't blame her. I didn't respect myself either, Martin said. I went through the usual routine of getting ready for bed. Diana did the same. Everything felt the same, like every other night, he continued. Once Diana was asleep, I got dressed, grabbed my wallet and keys, and went upstairs to check on Dallas. She was asleep, so I quietly blew her a kiss and said goodbye. I got in my car, knowing it had airbags but convinced that if I hit something hard enough, they wouldn't make a difference. I didn't have a specific plan. I just drove aimlessly around the area. When I passed a large oak tree, I noticed there weren't any obstacles in a straight path toward it. On my second pass, I steered directly toward it, Martin finished. Both he and Dr. Lasser sat quietly, processing the story. Eventually, Dr. Lasser broke the silence. Mr. Miller, I want to thank you for your honesty. It's rare for someone to open up like this. I'll let you rest and think about everything we've discussed. May I come back tomorrow? She asked. I'm not going anywhere, Martin replied with a hint of sarcasm. They shook hands, and Dr. Lasser left the room. Martin took out his cell phone, which had been left at home that night and later brought to him by Diana despite her protests. He answered a few messages and emails, informing his boss of his situation before trying to fall asleep. Meanwhile, Diana struggled to hold herself together. At first, she had believed that Martin had accepted her relationship with Bill, seeing it as an act of love. But as she thought more about the crash, she no longer dismissed it as an accident. She feared that the police might start questioning her about her affair with Bill. While adultery wasn't illegal, she worried about how it might impact Martin's case. She wondered if the authorities had decided it was an attempted suicide and had closed the investigation. Still, she couldn't recall Martin ever expressing indifference toward her affair, and she refused to give up her relationship with Bill simply because her husband's boss was involved. When Martin came home, Diana resolved to be more sensitive to his feelings and to establish clearer boundaries with Bill, but she remained firm in her decision to continue seeing him. The next morning, as promised, Dr. Lasser returned. Marty noticed the subtle changes in her attire, but remained distant. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Miller?" she asked. "Not much different from yesterday, Doc," he replied. "Ready to go home?" she inquired. "I guess, but it's up to you," he responded. "Partially. By law, you're required to stay for 72 hours, starting from our conversation yesterday. So you'll need to be here for at least 2 more days," Dr. Lusser explained. "That's fine, Doc. At least the food isn't bad here," Marty joked, and they shared a laugh. "An old one, but a good one," Dr. Lusser remarked. "I'm glad to see you're able to laugh." "Me too. It's been a while, months even, since I've felt like myself. I used to be a real joker, sometimes driving Dallas crazy," Marty reflected. "Have you had any other dark thoughts? Any more moments where you felt really low?" Dr. Lusser asked. "No, Doc, that's not the case. I spent a year feeling down, but lately it's been more about anger and disappointment, mostly in Diana and Dallas, but especially in myself. I should have stood up for myself, should have made it clear that what Diana did was unacceptable," Marty admitted. "Are you planning to stand up for yourself now?" Dr. Lusser asked. "Absolutely. While I'm tempted to file for divorce, I also realize I played a part in letting things get to this point. But if Diana agrees to end things with Bill, I'm willing to try counseling and see if we can fix our marriage," Marty declared. "I admire your resolve, Mr. Miller. Such a quick turnaround is rare," Dr. Lusser acknowledged. "I had a lot of time to think while lying here before we met. I'm grateful you gave me the space to talk. It's helped me sort through my thoughts," Marty said sincerely. "Wonderful, Mr. Miller, truly. I'll check in with you again tomorrow, but based on everything, I see no reason why you can't be discharged on schedule," Dr. Lusser concluded. "I'm looking forward to it," Doc Marty replied. When he was released, Diana and Dallas were there to pick him up. If Marty was serious about change, he knew he'd have to start behaving as though it was already happening. The airbags had worked better than Marty had expected. But the worst part of the crash was the concussion, which meant he needed plenty of rest in a dark, quiet room with no TV and only soft music playing. His wife and daughter were attentive, doing all they could to care for him. Everything seemed fine until Diana mentioned needing to go shopping. "No," Marty said calmly. What Diana responded, surprised. "There are things we need, including your creams for healing," Diana said. "Make a list for Dallas, she can take care of it," he insisted. "Why drag me into this, Dad? I already made plans with Bradley," Dallas protested. "Then you have all the more reason to get it done quickly," Marty replied. "Diana, make the list." "This is ridiculous, Martin. You can't just come home and upend everything. Dallas has plans, and I'm going to the store." "End of discussion," Diana snapped. Diana objected. "Do you think I'm a fool?" Marty challenged her. "A fool? No, never. But why would you say that? Do you think I'm unaware that these shopping trips are just an excuse to meet Bill? I haven't forgotten how you'd come back from the store. Sure, it's a convenient excuse, but you've been gone too long. Besides, I can see it in you the way you avoid looking me in the eyes. The slight changes in your clothes, your makeup being off, it's always a little different after you've been with Bill, but that ends now," Marty declared. The shock on Diana's face was unmistakable, and Dallas felt a new respect for her father. "Marty, please, we've already discussed this. I'll try to be more discreet. I admit I've gotten a little careless in arranging our meetings, but I'm not going to stop seeing him. I have a right to my own life, and I plan to keep it." "So our vows meant nothing? To stand by each other in sickness and health? This is part of that sickness, Diana. You don't just walk away," Marty responded. "But you'll end things with Bill, right now, and we'll go to counseling to fix our marriage. Otherwise, I'll be calling a divorce lawyer on Monday," he added firmly. "Don't you dare threaten me, Martin Miller. You wouldn't do that. If I could be with only you, I would. But the situation won't allow it. It's not my fault I didn't cause the accident. I wasn't involved, and my intimacy needs won't just disappear. So I'll keep shopping, keep seeing Bill, and take care of my needs. If you want to talk about it tonight, we can. But don't think you can control what I do," Diana declared before storming out, slamming the door so hard that the windows shook. The heavy silence that followed left both Marty and Dallas exchanging a glance. Marty quietly retreated to his room. For the first time, Dallas began to worry about her parents' future. Her father had never directly confronted her mother before, but this was different. This was serious. Deciding that this was an issue between them, she composed herself and left to meet Bradley. A part of Diana secretly wished Marty wouldn't recover, as she wasn't sure she could end things with Bill. Bill was assertive and strong-willed, never asking if his actions suited her. He just did what he wanted. As the night grew darker, Dallas returned home to find her father lying in his room. A faint light came from the bathroom, where the door was slightly open. She realized her father preferred a soft light, but the room's lamps didn't offer such a gentle glow. "Dad," she called out softly. He remained facing away, but answered, "Dallas." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaky. Her words caught his attention, and he sat up to see her standing in the doorway, quietly crying. "What's wrong?" Marty asked. He hadn't used the affectionate nicknames he once had for her since discovering she had helped her mother find a lover. Despite her tears, he couldn't shake the thought that it had all been planned. Dallas walked closer, stopping at the foot of his bed. "I'm sorry for what I did. I just wanted to help Mom. She was so upset about everything that had happened to you, and that you couldn't, well, you know what I mean." And Bradley's dad had been going through a similar thing after Mrs. Coyle passed away. Bradley says his dad talks about how much he misses her. "I thought they could help each other. I never thought about how it would affect you. Is that why you did it that night?" Marty was taken aback by his daughter's sudden admission. It could have been a ploy, but he decided to take her words at face value. If he was deceived again, so be it. Mostly, yes, I was feeling pretty down because I couldn't. Well, you know. Father and daughter shared a brief smile. "But it's over now, Dee. I won't let that happen again." "I hope not. I need you." "Are you going to divorce Mom?" she asked softly. "I haven't made up my mind yet, sweetheart. But if she keeps seeing Bill, I don't see another choice. Keep this between us, though. She needs to change because she wants to, not because she's forced," Marty said. "Okay, Dad. I'm going upstairs." "Oh, and I broke up with Bradley tonight," Dallas added. Marty tried to hide his surprise. He'd never liked the boy, so this was unexpected, especially since Dallas seemed so infatuated with him. Why, he asked, intrigued. "Because," Dallas started, then paused, thinking. "Because you once told me he wasn't good enough for me, and I finally realized you were right. You've been right about a lot of things," she said. A proud smile spread across Marty's face as he realized how much his daughter had grown. Dallas stepped forward, hugging her father. It was the first embrace they'd shared in a long time. They parted, exchanged smiles, and Marty watched as she quietly left the room. He listened as her bedroom door clicked shut. Moments later, he heard Diana's cheerful voice as she locked her car outside. The warmth he'd just felt disappeared. He closed his eyes as Diana entered the room. She had showered at Bill's, and Marty noticed immediately. Better to come back smelling fresh than like that, he commented to himself. "Can you help with the groceries?" Diana asked. "Did you get everything on the list?" Marty replied, sitting up. "Yes, Marty. I went grocery shopping, like I said," Diana responded. Marty unloaded the bags from the car to the kitchen counter, noticing there were no perishable items. Glancing at the receipt, he saw that she had left the store almost 2 hours ago. "I went shopping first, then I visited Bill," she admitted. Though he had expected it, the sight still stung. After they unpacked, Marty returned to the bedroom, pondering whether it was worth reopening the conversation. It felt futile. Diana had made her intentions clear. He needed to decide his next step. "Do you want to talk more?" Diana asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't hopeful for a productive conversation. "No, Diana. Your position is crystal clear," Marty replied. Her expression softened, revealing the affection she still felt for him. She viewed her pursuit of physical satisfaction as justified, given the circumstances, and hoped he'd eventually see it her way. With a nod, she went to her closet, briefly considering rekindling their closeness, but not tonight. By the time she got into bed, Marty appeared to be asleep or was pretending to be. The divorce proceedings were bitter. Diana was furious when the papers arrived. Marty had them delivered to their home and moved upstairs to the guest room next to Dallas's. Diana hired an aggressive lawyer who pursued every possible avenue, even trying to paint Marty as mentally unstable due to his alleged suicide attempt. Anticipating this, Marty had started therapy the same week the legal process began. The psychologist he consulted was well respected, and their testimony affirming Marty's mental fitness swayed the judge. Although the legal battle could have dragged on, Dallas stepped in before things escalated further. She firmly reminded her mother that her actions contradicted the vows they had made as a family. Life might be unfair, but that didn't excuse breaking commitments. Dallas warned that if her mother continued down this path, it would damage their relationship beyond repair. Confronted with the possibility of losing both her husband and her daughter, Diana reconsidered her choices. Diana eventually gave in, agreeing to the divorce. Their house was sold, and Marty accepted the terms of providing alimony for a set period, a compromise he knew the court would likely enforce anyway. Diana secured a 2-bedroom apartment near her job and resumed full-time work 8 months after the divorce. The breakup left her bitter, especially when Bill ended their relationship, revealing he had been seeing other women. Diana's appeal seemed to fade once she was no longer married. Meanwhile, Dallas continued her studies, splitting her time between her parents. Over time, Diana began to adopt a victim mindset, frequently blaming Marty for the divorce. On one occasion, Dallas overheard her mother say, if only he had been more understanding, to which Dallas snapped, "Did you even think about Dad?" One Friday night around 10 p.m., Marty walked into a dimly lit club, seeking a brief escape from home. He wasn't looking for anything more than a few drinks and some dancing. Taking a seat at the bar, he ordered a rum and coke. As he sipped, he scanned the room and noticed a woman at the far end of the bar who seemed oddly familiar, though he couldn't immediately place her. A nearly empty wine glass sat in front of her, her long dark brown hair and revealing dress catching his eye. Struggling to recall where he'd seen her before, Marty's memory finally clicked. A faint smile crossed his face as he picked up his drink and approached her. As he neared, she glanced up. "Dr. Lasser?" Marty asked. She met his eyes, studying him for a moment, but showed no sign of recognition, making Marty second-guess himself. "Are you Dr. Lasser, from the hospital?" "Out here, I'm Vicky. I'm afraid you have the upper hand. I meet too many patients to remember everyone," she said. "Martin Miller," he replied, challenging her memory. Vicky paused, thinking over the name while Marty waited. Slowly, recognition dawned. "Ah, Mr. Miller. A cheating wife and an unexpected encounter with a tree, if I recall," she said. "Right on target. It's surprising we've only spoken twice, almost 2 years ago." "What a coincidence." "Care to join me?" Vicky offered. Marty sat down and signaled for the bartender to refill their drinks. "Thanks, I'm up for it. So, what brings you out tonight?" "Meeting someone special?" Marty asked. "Trying to," Vicky replied, her playful eyes leaving no doubt about her intentions. "Really? I remember you wearing quite an impressive ring. Or am I mistaken?" he teased. "Not long after my divorce was finalized, I kept wearing the rings, hoping to make my ex-husband realize he had little in common with his 20-year-old fling other than wanting her friend to join them in bed. Unfortunately, I wasn't successful." "Good grief. Are they still together?" "To be honest, I lost interest in Wayne's life after the divorce." "No idea," she replied, shaking her head. "A silly question, I admit. And please, call me Marty or Martin or whatever. Just don't call me Mr. Miller." "Fine then, Marty." "Care to dance with me?" Vicky invited. Marty asked the bartender to keep an eye on their drinks, then led Vicky to the dance floor. They moved in sync to an upbeat rhythm, enjoying another lively tune before the music slowed. They stayed close, swaying gently to the softer melody. Vicky wrapped her arms around Marty's neck, while he held her securely by the waist, quickly noticing she wasn't wearing a bra. They locked eyes briefly before Vicky rested her head on his shoulder, and their embrace continued into the next song. Marty found himself captivated by her presence, her soft touch lulling him into the moment. As the music faded, Vicky whispered in his ear, taking advantage of the quiet. "Martin, I've had enough dancing, but I'm also feeling a bit lonely, if you know what I mean," she murmured. "How about I take you home, and we deal with that?" he offered. Taking her hand, Marty led Vicky back to the bar, paid the tab, and noticed the bartender wasn't surprised, which suggested Vicky had arrived by rideshare. They made their way to Marty's car, and he drove them to his apartment. As they parked, Marty hesitated. "Vicky, maybe I should have asked earlier, how much have you had to drink?" "I only had 1 glass of wine when you first got here," she reassured him. "Just checking." "I don't take advantage of women who've had too much." "Don't worry, Martin." Arriving at his apartment building, they took the elevator to his floor, Vicky clinging to him as they exchanged passionate kisses along the way. Once inside his apartment, with the door shut behind them, Vicky wasted no time and quickly slipped out of her dress. "Wow, Vicky. You look incredible." "Thank you, Martin." "But are you just going to stare?" "I hope not." "Take me to your bedroom," she teased. Marty led her down the hall, grateful that Dallas was spending the weekend with her mother. "I hope you've got protection," Vicky said playfully. Marty did, retrieving a few from his bedside drawer and placing them on the nightstand. After over an hour of passionate lovemaking, they returned to reality, lying in bed together. Vicky was nestled against Marty's side as they relaxed in a peaceful state, teetering between sleep and wakefulness. Suddenly, Vicky lifted her head slightly. "Martin, I just remembered, did your issue with erectile dysfunction ever get resolved?" "Thankfully, yes. It's not a problem anymore." "What happened?" "Well, a couple of months after that accident with the tree, I started feeling this tingling, like when a limb falls asleep and is waking up. It lasted for weeks." "Were you still married? Did you tell your wife?" "Technically, yes, we were still married, but we'd been living apart for a while. And no, I didn't mention it. It didn't seem important. After a few months, I started getting morning erections again, and soon everything was back to normal." "What did the doctors say?" "They couldn't figure it out. They ran countless tests, but in the end they couldn't pinpoint a cause. They guessed that the impact from the accident somehow fixed it, but who knows?" "Well, lucky me," I guess Vicky grinned. "Mind if I stay the night?" "Not at all. Should we plan on another round in the morning, followed by breakfast?" Marty suggested. As they settled in for the night, Marty had one more question. "Vicky, do you think you're ready for a serious relationship?" There was a long silence, and Marty worried he might have pushed too far, too soon. He feared she might get up, ask him to take her home, or call for an Uber. He knew her attraction to him wasn't just physical, she was smart, and he enjoyed her company. While it wasn't love yet, she was the first woman he had seriously considered since his divorce. "Can we talk about this in the morning?" Vicky finally replied. "Good night," Vicky Martin said softly. "Good night, Martin," she replied. Vicky woke up before Martin, finding him resting peacefully, so she decided to let him continue sleeping. After using his shower, she made her way to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The question Martin had asked the previous night lingered in her mind. It wasn't that she wasn't attracted to him, but she had been focused on enjoying life moment by moment. For months, she had convinced herself that she didn't need a man in her life, which was partially true. She had a great job and supportive friends, and for the most part, she was happy. Yet, if she was truly honest, she missed having a companion. But how would a good man react when she revealed her past? The smell of something cooking roused Martin from his sleep. He groggily made his way to the kitchen and found Vicky, dressed in his shirt from the night before and wearing an apron he kept in the closet. "I was going to invite you out for breakfast, but it seems I'm too late for that. Maybe you could invite me to lunch instead," he joked. "Go take a quick shower. Breakfast will be ready in about 10 minutes, she responded, smiling. Martin joined Vicky in the kitchen, just as she was setting the table. A freshly made omelette, sausages and buttered toast greeted him. "I didn't even realize I had sausages," Martin said with a laugh. "They were in the freezer." "Hope they're still good," Vicky replied. Martin took a bite and complimented the meal. Breakfast passed mostly in comfortable silence, and afterward, Martin offered to clean up since Vicky had cooked. As he loaded the dishwasher, he turned to her and asked, "Are you ready to talk?" Vicky looked at him and took a deep breath. "Mostly, I need you to listen. I don't want to complicate things, and if you're only looking for something casual, I'm okay with that. You don't owe me anything," he reassured her. "There's something I need to share with you," Vicky began. "Can we talk in the bedroom? I'll feel more at ease there." Hand in hand, they moved to the bedroom and sat on the bed, facing each other. Vicky squeezed Martin's hands, her voice turning serious. "Martin, although we've only just met, I really like you. But there's something important I need you to know. I mentioned my husband left me for a younger woman, which is true, but that's not the whole story. The real reason he left was because I can't have children. He wanted a family of his own. And when adoption wasn't an option for him, he saw our inability to have kids as my fault," Vicky explained, her voice tinged with sadness. "I'm in my 40s with an adult daughter, so having more kids isn't a deal breaker for me," Martin replied. "Good to know," Vicky nodded. "But there's something else you should hear. After my divorce, I went through a tough time. I struggled with getting older and the fact that my husband had left me for someone so much younger. In case you were curious, I'm 37. "I was curious," Martin admitted with a chuckle, trying to lighten the mood. Vicky smiled slightly before continuing. "I also felt incomplete. I didn't feel like much of a woman anymore. How could I, when I couldn't have children? I know it sounds irrational, but that's how I felt. So I decided that if I couldn't define my womanhood through motherhood, I would define it in other ways. I started engaging in casual encounters with strangers, a lot of them. I even used the alias Angela and never turned down an opportunity when I felt like it. This went on for several months until I realized how destructive it was, so I sought therapy. Even then, I didn't stop completely. I just did it less until I finally put an end to it. Is that what you were doing last night, Martin? Asked gently. He wasn't trying to be harsh, but was genuinely curious, recognizing that she had been out on the prowl. Yes, you could say that, Vicky admitted. I have needs, and sometimes I go out to meet them. But now, I'm more selective. There have been plenty of nights where I've gone home alone and taken care of things myself. I suppose I should be glad you passed the test, she added with a slight smile. Martin exhaled softly, relieved by her honesty. Of course, he said, his voice gentle. Vicky sighed, continuing, Martin, I really enjoy being with you. And to answer your question, yes, I'm open to exploring something more, but I needed to be upfront with you about my past. I actually got tested recently, and everything came back clear. I'm not on birth control. But I can provide proof if you need it. Assuming you're open to it, I think we should both get tested and commit to being exclusive. Martin sat in silence for a moment, processing her words. Vicky anxiously waited for his response, watching his face for any sign of judgment. Finally, Martin spoke. Vicky, thank you for being so honest. I know that couldn't have been easy. I think I owe you the same honesty. Our experiences aren't too different. After my divorce, I was relieved it was over, but I also struggled with feeling like I wasn't good enough. I wondered if I'd ever find someone again. Or if I was destined to be alone. My therapist mentioned that many women lose interest in sex as they age and prefer other types of affection. I thought I'd have to find someone much older or wait for things to settle down. Even when my issues resolved, I wasn't in the best shape emotionally. Just like you felt the need to reclaim your femininity, I felt the need to prove my masculinity. I went out, trying to validate myself through women. I wasn't picky, and some of the encounters were very casual. Let's just say I've had my share of experiences. Martin paused, then continued. I wasn't as lucky as you, though. I had a bout of gonorrhea and had to admit to my doctor that I couldn't remember the names of all my partners. I got it treated, and with therapy. I started to understand my behavior. It's been a long time since I've been with a woman without protection. But I'm willing to get tested, and I'm open to exclusivity. Vicky smiled, her anxiety easing as she asked, So are we giving it a shot us together? Vicky, blinking slowly as if already knowing the answer, asked, Are we really doing this? I suppose so, Martin replied to her rhetorical question. By lunchtime, Martin's supply of contraceptives had run out. The unavoidable meeting with Diana occurred about 3 months into Martin and Vicky's relationship. By then, their bond had grown strong, and Vicky got along well with Dallas. Though they each still had their own places, they spent every night together, hinting at a deeper commitment. One evening, they decided to visit a club catering to a more mature crowd. With a DJ playing music and a layout that encouraged conversation, it seemed like the perfect spot for a relaxed night out. Martin and Vicky were having a great time when suddenly, Martin's smile faded, his eyes shifting past her. Curious, Vicky followed his gaze and spotted Diana. Their eyes met almost at the same moment. Martin's face became expressionless, while Diana's twisted into a smirk as she made her way toward them. Though time had passed since the divorce, Diana still harbored resentment. In her mind, she hadn't done anything seriously wrong, aside from perhaps being a bit careless. She didn't see her extramarital affairs as a mistake after all. They were due to her husband's shortcomings, or so she believed. As she approached their table, it was clear her intentions were far from friendly. Marty, how lovely to see you, Diana greeted with obvious sarcasm. Diana Martin responded evenly, keeping his tone neutral. Vicky, this is my ex-wife Diana, he introduced, though he would have preferred not to. Pleased to meet you, Diana. I've heard a lot about you, Vicky said politely. Well, I haven't heard a single thing about you, Diana shot back bitterly. We're divorced, Diana. It's been over a year. My life isn't your concern anymore. Now, if you'll excuse us, Martin said firmly, clearly indicating that he wanted her to leave them alone. Of course, Martin. I wouldn't want to interrupt your date. But Vicky, there's something you should know, Diana added with a sly grin. And what might that be, Vicky asked, glancing at Martin before turning her attention back to Diana. You probably shouldn't get involved with him. We divorced because he couldn't perform, Diana said smugly. Martin watched Vicky closely, waiting to see how she would respond. Vicky suppressed a chuckle, then looked at Martin with a raised eyebrow. Is that so? You didn't mention that, Vicky said, clearly playing along. Martin shrugged, letting Vicky take the lead. Diana, confident that she had just undermined Marty's relationship as he had done to hers with Bill, savored the moment. However, her satisfaction was short-lived. "Well, that's surprising," Vicky said, deadpan. "Because if what I was riding last night wasn't fully functional, then a real one would probably finish me off," she quipped. Diana's smile disappeared instantly. Vicky and Martin exchanged a glance, subtly mocking Diana's failed attempt to drive a wedge between them. Diana looked confused, trying to comprehend what had just happened. "Wait, what is she talking about?" Vicky asked, feigning curiosity. "Marty, are you saying everything's working now?" she teased. Martin grinned mischievously, clearly enjoying Diana's confusion. Apparently, during Dallas's occasional visits, she hadn't shared any updates on her father's personal life. "Well, Diana, you're still sharp, just like old times," Vicky said with a smile. Diana's excitement grew as she pressed further. "But how? Did the doctors find a solution?" Diana asked, her voice rising in anticipation. Martin and Vicky remained silent, watching as Diana's frustration mounted. "Come on, Marty, this issue ended our marriage." "Don't I deserve to know what happened?" Diana insisted. Martin's smile faded as he responded, "First of all, Diana, it wasn't my condition that ended our marriage. Your choices did that. You decided to do what you did, not me. Second, you don't deserve to know anything. We're divorced. My life is private." "Please, Marty, you can blame me for the breakup, and I can't deny that. But I wouldn't have done what I did if things had been normal," Diana countered. "Diana, it just happened. The doctors think that whatever the issue was after the first accident, it needed time to heal. If you had been patient and stuck with me through my illness, as our vows said, we'd still be married," Martin explained calmly. Diana was left speechless, her mouth hanging open as she struggled to process this revelation. "I can't believe this. It's like fate is against me," she muttered. "Just upholding the vows," Martin murmured under his breath. "What was that?" Diana asked, her eyes narrowing. "Nothing. It doesn't matter. Now you know the truth. Can we have the rest of the evening in peace?" Martin requested. After about 30 seconds of deep thought, Diana met Martin's eyes with a remorseful look. "You're right, Marty. I owe you an apology. What I did was selfish and short-sighted. I should have been stronger. I ruined a good marriage. I'm truly sorry," she admitted. With that, Diana turned and walked away, leaving not only their table but the club as well. Martin and Vicky watched her go, feeling a small pang of sympathy. Then Martin turned to Vicky, his tone warm again. "Let's dance, my love." 6 months later, Martin and Vicky were married,